Oh, dear. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Welcome to obviously elected members, staff and visitors and people watching online. Lovely to have you all with us. Just want to make note that this is my last Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting that I will be chairing, and I've had to say I've really enjoyed all 3 years of it, and I think we've done some great work, and I've had to acknowledge the hard work of the team in that space. So let's make this a good one. So without further ado, let's move on with our agenda. We have apologies this morning from Councillors Barnes and Pettit, I believe. I'm happy to move that from the chair. Lou will second that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Moving on then to disclosures of interests. You will have read the agendas. Lou. Plan change 17, Claire is the same, and Roger, all commissioners on that matter. So I think it'd be appropriate. Andrew?
Waipa District Council Community Recovery Fund. I noticed that what's application my business partners application.
Okay.
We also sponsor them.
It's the money going the other way. Yeah.
I will definitely stand.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And Marcus, did you have something to add?
Yeah, me for ConnexU, they're a client of mine, and also Cone Alahara, a client of mine, but they are not getting any funding for that.
Okay. Lou?
Also a patron of Te Amu Sports, so they're receiving funds.
Okay, excellent. Okay, will there be anybody left in the room? Just asking. Oh, we're here. Excellent. So we've got the three commissioners for the PC 17, Andrew, Marcus and Lou for their respective interests in the COVID recovery matter. Excellent. Any others? No? You'll stay in the room. Excellent. Brilliant. Okay, we just note those. Moving on then to late items. I'm not aware of there being any. So that's great. And then to the confirmation of the order of the meeting. It's not to be changed as far as I'm aware. Graham is happy to move that. Bruce will second that. Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Great. So that moves us then to our first more significant item of confirmation of our minutes. For some reason, I'm not even looking at my agenda. I'm going red. Yeah, ooh, going quite crazy. So our confirmation of our minutes, as we normally do, I will just, we're addressing minutes for the meetings 2nd of August and the extraordinary meeting on the 9th of August. I will just cite the numbers of the pages, and if you've got an issue, raise your hand or yell out at me. 10 and 11, 12, 13, 14, and then on to the extraordinary one, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Roger's happy to move that for me, and Lou will second. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And just like that, we're moving into our first real substantive item, which is going to be introduced by Tony Quickfall. It's the report to notify Plan Change 17, which of course we all like to refer to as Hautapu Industrial Zone, because we don't like just using numbers, remember. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I'll take the report as read, and I'll just take you through some background to Plan Change 17. We do have a request for a presentation, speaking rights, that I understand you've accepted, so I'll take you through some of the background. So Plan Change 17, on the face of it, it's fairly straightforward. It seeks to do three things. You've already been briefed on this, but just by way of, I guess, reminder. So there's growth cells in the Hautapu area, and as part of those, they have structure plans. Some of those structure plans are out of date with the master plan, and so we need to realign those. So that's one thing that Plan Change 17 seeks to do. Growth cell C9, there's been some consents that have been granted in there, and it occurred to us that with the demand that we're getting for industrial zone, we've got an opportunity to uplift that zoning, which makes that growth cell live zoned to industrial. So that's part of what Plan Change 17 seeks to do. And the third thing it seeks to do is to rezone an area north of Hautapu Road. If you want to refer to a map, it's on page 41 of the agenda. There's I think it's figure 1 there, and that shows the extent of the rezoning. Rezoning that from rural to industrial to better reflect the land use there. There's a willing landowner who did approach us. It's been confirmed through future-proof growth strategy. I think the wording in there is for short-term development. So we've taken the opportunity through Plan Change 17 to look at rezoning that area as well. I just want to take you through the process a little bit because that's some of the background that you'll be hearing a little bit about shortly. So as part of our normal process, once we had the plan change confirmed and we had the scope confirmed, at that point, we're in a position that we could go up for consultation with directly affected parties. The Act doesn't actually require us to do that before we go through the statutory process. So we thought it was a good idea to do a letter drop to neighbours of that area, which we did. We invited feedback and we got a request to meet with several neighbours to the north of the area that we're proposing to rezone. So we had a meeting with those neighbours and there were some concerns that were expressed around, I guess, the effects of that rezoning on some existing land uses there, some existing properties, the house that's being built. We heard they were concerned around visual, noise, light spill, the potential impacts from industry on those activities. So as a result of that, you'll recall that we had 2 workshops with this council to bring that back to you and seek clarification and direction around what you'd like us to do with that. And as a result of that, our recommendation today is that we don't extend any zoning beyond what's proposed. Subsequently, and we've been briefing those landowners, their consultant, of the background to that. Subsequently, we did receive a formal request from Mr. Crisp, who's the representative of those landowners. And the request, it's perhaps not clarified in the report as well as it could be. So on page 4 in my report, I've described that as putting the request was to put Plan Change 17 on hold. I do want to clarify that because you'll hear about that from the representatives today. That's a consequence of the request. So just to be clear, in Appendix 1, if you read through Appendix 1, the request that was made, the request wasn't to put it on hold, but that is an absolute consequence of a result of us entertaining the request that was made. If we had entertained the request that was made as it was made, we wouldn't have been able to take this report to this committee meeting. And the consequence of that would be pushing Plan Change 2017 into the new triennium of the new council. That was unacceptable because Plan Change 17 is already about 18 months behind schedule. The misalignment of the structure plan with the master plan is causing our consent team some challenges. And so it was really important that we felt the need to get Plan Change 17 notified and underway. Subsequent to this report, I'll let the landowners' representatives just explain to you what they think their concerns are. But there was some correspondence around, I guess, the accuracy of the report, the way it was presented. I am very comfortable with what's in the report. I've had several conversations with the landowners' representatives, stand behind the report. I did want to clarify that one point though, around the consequence versus actually a request to put it on hold. So that's the background to it. Relatively straightforward plan change on the face of it, but there's obviously some neighbours who have some concerns. Oh, the other thing I was going to say too is you'll appreciate this isn't a hearing environment. The merits of the plan change will be heard through the plan change process, and there is the ability for any party to submit. And unusually, we have actually recommended in this report something that we wouldn't normally do, which is an in-principle agreement to consider a variation if there's sufficient evidence provided for those landowners that supports the rezoning. It's unusual because only a council can initiate a variation, no private party can. But in this case, we felt that because of the nature of the correspondence, it would be appropriate to indicate a little bit of certainty without committing to a variation. We can't predetermine that, but we wanted to put that in the resolution because if there's an investment that's need to be made by those parties to get supporting reports, they need to know that there's something at the end that they might be able to take that to if those reports support rezoning. So that's why that unusual recommendation is in there. Happy to take any questions now, or if you'd like me to stand down and I can clarify anything afterwards if you'd like me to.
I think we'll see if elected members have any questions from you at this point. Does anybody have a question or query or require any further explanation from Tony? No, you're all fine at the moment. Excellent, thank you for that, Tony. So obviously the background, as Tony has put to us today, a question was then asked by the lawyers of the respective landowners, whether they could be heard today, and I have exercised the discretion to allow that. So I think first cab off the rank we'll hear from Lachlan McDowell on behalf of the Karma Trust. So you'll have 10 minutes to address the elected membership. A bell will ring at 9 minutes. Claire will ring that just to warn that you have a minute to go. And just to stress that we need to be quite clear that the decision today is about notifying the merits and not the merits or going into the merits of the actual plan change in and of itself. So Lachlan, welcome. Take a seat next to Tony. I'm sure he won't bite. Or Tony, do you want to? Either or? Welcome. And welcome, Nita. Sorry, I didn't see you there. She's online. Welcome, gentlemen. Oh, sorry. Gareth, could I just ask that you turn your thing on? Lovely, thank you.
And on my left is Malcolm Boyd from Karma Trust. So, look, thank you. It's been a long time since I've been in this committee room. Actually, a few familiar faces. Thank you for being given the opportunity to talk this morning. We've collectively got 2 or 3 bullet points to talk through, and then obviously happy to ask any questions or answer any questions. I guess the first thing we'd like, as a bit of a background on the planner who's been representing Karma Trust through this process, which involved the submissions on Future Proof and then assisting council with the preparation of Plan Change 17. Up until this point, Karma Trust has worked collaboratively with council and is fully supportive of the notification of Plan Change 17 as proposed. We'd like to point out, to clarify, that Karma Trust is not necessarily in opposition to the industrial zoning of the land to the north. What Karma Trust is in opposition to is a potential delay in timing. So it comes down to, it's all about timing from our side of things. In order to hit this, as a bit of background, in order to hit our notification deadlines, we've had to work this year to prepare specialist reports, which included stormwater, wastewater, water, geotechnical, ecology, traffic. So these reports come in at a substantial cost and with really tight timeframes. So we're obviously worked really hard to hit our deadlines and are really keen to see Plan Change 17 notified as proposed. In terms of the timing, and I'm mentioning timing again, I'm wondering if Malcolm might be able to give a little bit more insight just in terms of some of the businesses that have approached you and why the timing is so critical.
Yeah, we're starting to enter into some heads of agreements with some business people from the Carter's Flat area. At the moment, we can't say who those are because we've entered into non-disclosure agreements with them. But that was, in working with council, we don't want to delay these because they're becoming significant commercial costs to both parties.
Thanks, Malcolm. So look, that's essentially that's all we have to talk about today. Just to re-emphasise, we're not necessarily opposed to the rezoning of land to the north. That's important, and we would like to obviously wish the committee to approve Plan Change 17 for notification as per the recommendation. That's all I wanted to talk about. To be honest, if there's any questions, happy to answer any.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth and Malcolm. Any questions for either of these gentlemen in respect of their position at this moment? Go ahead.
That dovetails in very nicely with Tony wanting to get this through now. Otherwise, you're going to be going through Christmas into the new year. So everybody's helping everybody else to get this underway. So that's really good to hear. Really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for this gentleman? No, not at this point. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us today and clarifying for us your position on this plan change.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. So now Marianne McIntosh. I believe Marianne's here. Yes. Good morning. And Mark, nice to see you both. Same deal. A bell will sound at 9 minutes to give you 1 minute warning. And just to stress that obviously the decision today is about notification and the merits of notification, not the actual merits of the plan change in and of itself.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Mark to kick off with some of his some comments that he has in relation to the report and some of the content around timing. But just as an introduction, I'm representing the landowners to the north of the Karma Trust land. And firstly, we're not looking to cause any kind of delay and support the resolution to notify the plan change. It's just a question of opportunity for my clients to be able to make a submission to add to the extent of the land being rezoned and or the opportunity to assist council through a variation if that's necessary after the fact. So I'll hand over to Mr. Crisp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We should also point out that 3 of our landowner clients are here today. So we have, just want to put your hands up. So we have Dean Hawthorne, we have John Gudnason, and we have Peter Cameron over there. So thank you again. I had a whole lot of notes here, which was sort of based on a bit of a grievance about inaccurate information in the report. Tony's addressed some of that this morning because there certainly was no request to delay plan change 17. And in fact, and indeed, there is no consequence of what we proposed that would cause a delay. So what happened was this proposal for my clients came completely out of the blue. They knew nothing about it. It was not part of the Waipa 2050, the recently reviewed Waipa 2050 growth strategy. It was advanced through Future Proof, which is an in-house process, which if you're not in the industry, you would have no way of knowing about it. In fact, my clients didn't even know the existence of Future Proof or what it does. There was no consultation with the neighbours in terms of what was proposed, either by Karma Trust or by the council, until the 26th of May, when they received a letter saying, this is what's happening. Let us know if you've got any comments. So we did, and organised a meeting with Tony and basically outlined some pretty significant effects that were of concern to our clients. So John's got a house that's within about 20 metres of the Karma Trust boundary, which he purchased and settled on in February this year. Obviously after this has all been kicked off, but not known about. Dean was granted a building consent in February this year, and he's $170,000 in the hole in terms of that project, but has now had to pull the pin, and that money can't be obtained back. He also runs a thoroughbred adjustment business with, thoroughbred racehorses up, valued up to about $1 million. His clients are not going to send them to him when you've got industrial activity right next door. So these were pretty serious concerns that we raised. And we thought, well, okay, the obvious thing to do is to oppose the plan change. But we thought, well, let's be a little bit more constructive and see if we can work with Karma Trust and come up with some better outcome that results in a live and let live sort of outcome. So we came up with the idea of, we wanted to make sure we didn't cut anyone's lunch and that Karma Trust got to carry on doing what they wanted to do within the timeframes. So we said, right, we accepted that my clients would need to do the work to justify the ability for their land to ultimately become industrial. so I put together at Tony's request a proposal which mapped out how this could occur. And then the first query back from Nita Belluri was about timeframes, and I pointed out that we could have it done probably in about 3 months. Now, bear in mind, we prepared an entire plan change for the Bardowie Industrial Precinct in the space of 3.5 months, from briefing to lodgement, for a proposal which is about twice the size of this. So it can be done. And when you think about it, this was back in July, we were talking about this. If you get to, if you're going to notify this sometime this month, say October is your submission period, summary of submissions and further submissions in November. So you'll get to the end of this year and you'll have your submission process complete. Well, by that stage, we will have lodged a submission in support, hopefully, and we will have the documentation in place to be able to justify that what can happen in this land in the future. And then it could be included within the ambit of Plan Change 17 by way of submission. So our key thing is we do not want to be shut down on the basis of scope, whereby council officers turn around and say, oh, this is not a submission on Plan Change 17, because Plan Change 17 is only the Karma Trust land. Now, we appreciate the offer of a variation down the track, but that really needs to be seen as a fallback. It's a comparatively a grossly inefficient way of addressing the matter when you've got the opportunity to address this through Plan Change 17. So if we lodge a submission, we get status. If we serve up the evidence, and that will all be there well and truly before Nita Belluri has to produce her 42A report. So you'll have it all on the table. There's plenty of examples where zonings have been introduced by way of submission processes in this district and elsewhere. And that's essentially what we're seeking. And yeah, so I probably don't need to go too much more. So I'll hand over to Marianne, and we can go from there.
Thank you. And sorry, I just want to reiterate the point that we understand this is not about a substantive debate today. It isn't about a debate at the substantive merits of what we're proposing or what my client is seeking. I think it's really helpful that the council officers have prepared the resolution in the way that they have, and referring to the opportunity for a variation after, should the timing not work out as far as providing technical evidence is concerned. There's probably 2 more points that I'd just like to quickly make. The reference to subject to funding is explained by Mr. Crisp, and I think council officers are also aware that my clients, our group, would do most of the, I guess you'd call it, heavy lifting as far as preparation of material is concerned. So the cost to council would be minimal. And the second point around scope to make a submission, again, appreciate the content of the Section 32 evaluation. In my view, there is sufficient scope provided through the references in that report and also the plan change documents themselves to give us that opportunity. So whilst we wanted to clarify the points around the fact we weren't seeking a delay, we want to work with Karma Trust, work with council, but we just don't want to be cut out of an opportunity to pursue adding that land, provided those technical reports are ready. So at this stage, we're aiming for that to be produced in time for maybe even advance of the 42A report, but certainly during evidence exchange after making a submission on the plan change.
So just finally, what would be really helpful in terms of appreciating that today is the decision about notification, but the question still remains, what is it that you're actually notifying? So it would be helpful if it was made explicitly clear in the documentation to a greater extent than it is at present, that the possibility of land to the north being ultimately rezoned as deferred industrial as a consequence of Plan Change 17 is within scope. So it's we're not trying to predetermine any merits. That's a decision for the commissioners who will determine it at the end of the day. All we're essentially asking for is the most efficient process, rather than saying, well, it's out there and we'll kick for touch and maybe it's a variation down the track if we can afford it. We need some certainty now, so that because the thing is, my clients are about to invest some quite large sums of money investigating all these issues, as you can imagine, in terms of, it's our obligation to be able to prove to you. That's going to cost a lot of money. And we don't want to do that. And then for the council officers to turn around and say, sorry, no scope. Okay. Because that's why we've been having these discussions, to try and ensure we have a process.
Okay, lovely. Look, thank you for that. How about I open the table for questions of these two, and then perhaps give Tony the opportunity to address some of the issues as they've been raised by you both. Really heartened to hear that you have no opposition to notification in its broader sense. That's a positive step forward today. So if I just open the floor and see if there are any questions from elected members. Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Look, thank you to Gareth, Marianne, and to you, Mark, for your straightforward approach with this. Reading the actual report, as Susan knows, I found somewhat challenging, because there were a number of, I guess, questions that I had as to who really wanted what and what we were trying to achieve here, and really what was going to enable all the parties to come to an agreed position. So first of all, are you happy with the recommendation D? Are you happy? And I understand, Marianne, I think you just said that you were, even though it still has that word variation in it. And my other question is to Tony, I guess, if you're happy, I'd love to hear your response after hearing both of the parties as well, just so I can understand if there's any change you want to make to any of the recommendations after hearing from both. So just to clarify.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so just on
recommendations that are there.
Sure. So the recommendation D, no issues at all with the recommendation that variation is agreed in principle. The point subject to sufficient funding, I took that to mean it's just standard council process that you need to consider funding, but I would like to make the point that our clients would be paying for all of the material, all the evidence gathering, the technical work, etc., that would go into that, and preparing the drafting as well, similar to what Karma Trust did, I think, for Plan Change 17. So I think that needs to be borne in mind by councillors, by the committee. The second point around this question of scope to make a submission to seek the land be added to, that is essentially that's a legal question as to what it means to have scope, what it means to have a submission on a plan change. And what Mr. Chris was trying to get to was that if our clients are going to invest a significant amount of money preparing all the relevant technical reports, then make a submission on the plan change to have a debate around, well, is there scope, is this actually on the plan change? My reading of the documentation in support of what's proposed to be notified, we've got a section 32 evaluation, which considers this as an option. It's been discounted on the basis of potential delay. And then there is some other material where it describes the land to the north. In my view, that does provide the opportunity for a submission to be made. But I think there is, it would be even more helpful if it was a little more express in that reporting. Now, that's not my call to make, that's over to council and council officers. But overall, I think I don't think there's a fundamental problem with what's being proposed in the recommendation or the content. There are a couple of points that could be further elaborated on to give our clients sufficient certainty that they're ready to push go on investing a significant amount of money, because otherwise they're left with the option of opposing with everything they've got, because their entire sort of, I guess, lives have been flipped up by this.
Thank you, Marianne. Great questions, Liz. In the lieu of there being any other burning question, I think it's really interesting if we hear from Tony. Or me, Jim, did you have a question?
Just quickly, and Tony has the opportunity to respond. It is around that sufficient funding, and I presume that's from a council perspective. Tony, so do you know what that is, and have we done any work on whether that's an issue or not? And the other, as a comment from a future-proof perspective, is this likely to run contrary to the future-proof decision to enable the Karma Trust area to be zoned for industrial purposes? Because we want to make sure we're not running foul of future-proof before all of this money is invested.
Madam Chair, before Tony responds, can I just make a couple of points on those issues?
Just quickly, because the question I think was put to Tony.
The marginal cost of us being able to pursue the outcome through plan change 17 is about zero. Obviously, there will be additional costs if there has to be a separate variation, because it's just by their own, as Marianne said, they're only process type costs because we'll be doing the heavy lifting. So there is an efficiency in terms of getting it in there. And the other thing, in terms of future proof, at the end of the day, it's this body, this council has the statutory function under section 31 of the RMA to manage land uses in its district. And it can consult, and it's great that it consults with, neighbouring authorities as well and things like that. But at the end of the day, that's your statutory function.
Thank you.
Just quickly, absolutely agree with that, Mark. But in terms of, we do have an agreement with the other two parties in future proof, the two council areas, and we want to make sure, I suppose, that this isn't running contrary to anything that they've decided collectively, or we've decided collectively, I should say. So yeah, we don't want to, I suppose, indicate that we're in favour and then have future proof saying that they're not in favour for any reason, and I'm not sure what that would be. So just really want to clear that issue up with future proof before we get too far down the path.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Well, thank you, Marianne and Mark, for coming today and talking to us about your clients' respective views. And it's been really important, as Liz has pointed out, a little bit of lack of clarity around what your positions were from the report. So it's nice to have that clarified today. And thank you for your support in terms of notification. Wonderful, thank you. And Tony, could I ask you to take the hot seat again? And perhaps if there are any other questions that elected members may have of you, or any issues you may wish to raise, just to tidy up in terms of some of the issues raised by the guests today, that would be helpful. Firstly, any questions of Tony from elected members? Andrew.
I'd probably like to hear your response first, and then I may have a question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mark and Marianne, for, I guess, what you see as clarification. So just I understand that you wanted to respond to the key points here. I wasn't intending, and I don't think it's appropriate to get into a debate and an opinion debate, but there are probably some points that are worth clarifying. So Mark did mention there's no consequence. That's a fundamental disagreement. The way that the deferred zoning that was proposed would work, it was presented as a simple paragraph that we insert into plan change 17. Technically, and Mark knows this, that's not what we need to do. We need to do a statutory analysis of all the statutory requirements, including the RPS, future proof, which is a statutory document that went through a special consultative process. We need to do map changes. So there's quite a body of work that needs to happen, and it's not just a simple case of putting in a paragraph. So I wanted to explain that, and that is the time consequence that it has on plan change 17. That's what it would have meant if we had looked to, I guess, beef up plan change 17 and put some deferred zone indication in there. I guess the fundamental point, though, and Marianne or Mark will be aware of this, is the RMA principle is that you can't pre-zone in a plan change in the expectation of evidence that may or may not come later. That's codified in law, and I'm very confident of this. In a previous role, having advised Marlborough District Council through to a High Court judicial review on scope of a plan change. So I'm very, very confident it is a legal matter and this isn't the appropriate place. And it's really unusual to have a request to pre-zone or deferred zoning with an expectation of evidence that may or may not happen later down the track. It's just something that's not done. So a variation is a legitimate process. That's the outcome. Very comfortable with that recommendation D. Don't have any changes to that. I think it is inefficient because it does introduce additional costs. And the costs to the council is that council runs the variation. So if the reports show that there's evidence for rezoning, we, council, then have to initiate a variation. That's a full mirror image of a plan change process. It's publicly notified. There are submissions, there are further submissions, and there are hearings. We don't have funding or budget for that, and we'd need to get a consultant to do that for us. So when I say that it's subject to cost, it's real because we don't have budget to do a variation. And so we'd need to find that budget if the landowners find or produce reports that support the variation. And so that's what's in principle. And I don't think we can go beyond that at this point in time. The Mayor raised about future-proof. It is probably worth touching base on that too. And we've acknowledged to Mark and the landowners there, I guess, some shortcomings in the future-proof process. I have fed that back as late as this week to future-proof again around better public engagement of the future-proof entity with some of the work that they're doing, because it wasn't that visible, and we've acknowledged that. But that aside, the future-proof strategy is now confirmed and went through a special consultative process under the Local Government Act. So it doesn't have status under the RMA, but it's one of those other matters that needs to be given consideration. My recollection is it does talk about a hard boundary at the edge of the Karma Trust site. And also, in addition, the regional policy statement will be introducing a plan change in October, which will codify the future-proof findings into the regional policy statement. That then introduces a level of statutory mandate that we have to take into account in any plan changes. I think I'd let Mr. Crisp know that that was happening. The Regional Council have given us a pre-draft of their plan change, and that will be something else we'll need to take into account at that time. So wrapping all that up, I think there is a solution here, which is a variation. That's always been open to us. What's different here is we're given a level of certainty around that by saying that in principle, if we can get the evidence and if we can find the funding, that is something we can certainly do.
Thanks, Tony. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. So this is outside my area of expertise, as you probably know, but it seems to me that what you've done is all that is possible to be done to accommodate the issues that these neighbours have. My question is that these issues have arisen to the neighbours of what is Plan Change 17. By extending the boundaries, if that happened under this variation, would we potentially run into more issues with more neighbours of the new boundaries?
That's a fair question. So the way it's been presented by the landowners, by their agents, is that's probably unlikely because there is a natural watercourse that could have riparian margins on it. So there is a natural buffer there. So that would be unlikely if it was extended, but that would be something we'd consider through any process.
Liz. Yeah, that was going to be my question actually as well, Andrew, because look, I'm very supportive of ensuring that this plan change moves as quickly as possible for Kamo Trust, simply because for all the reasons that they outlined at the beginning, and we're just following due process and we're working through, and it's been going on for some time. So we don't want to put any barriers in front of that. But my concern was always, we've got 3 landowners here today. How many more? So if I've got that certainty that there will be no delays, and we've had that from Marianne and from Mark, then I'm really confident that they will provide within, I'm hoping 3 months, all the information that we're going to require, and that all the parties can actually move through hopefully what will be a reasonably straightforward process, and we have a really, really good outcome for Waipa here. So I think that we're all looking for the same thing, and as long as we continue to follow the scope that we've all talked about today, and there's no more additions or changes, then I'm really comfortable with all the recommendations here and happy to move in that direction.
To clarify, you just reminded me. So there are two things I just want to clarify. So one is there is an additional paragraph going in. Mr. Chris talked about another paragraph. And we've got Nita online, I believe you may want to talk to that. We can only go so far with that. So Mr. Chris talked about an additional paragraph that future rezoning is within scope, I think was his words. Again, I don't believe we can go that far. We can put in a paragraph that talks about something in the future very nebulously, but we can't cover off scope without going through a full assessment process. And the consequence of not doing that right would be that we risk then other judicial reviews from other parties who want to support this plan change. For the feedback, you've heard from the neighbours to the north, we did get feedback from other parties in support of the Karma Trust rezoning. And if we were to follow a process that technically I couldn't support or staff couldn't support, we do run the risk of those other parties challenging that process. So I thought it would be worth clarifying that too.
Thanks, Tony. Any other questions of Tony or comments, observations people wish to make? No. So Liz has moved. Andrew's happy to second. It seems to me that this is a general comfort with the way that these recommendations have been drafted as moved and seconded. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Wonderful. Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Gareth, Malcolm, Marianne and Mark, and obviously the three gentlemen, owners, neighbours that have attended today. Thank you for coming and expressing your positions to us. Hopefully, once this is notified, you'll be able to take part in that submission process further. Have a great day. Thank you. You're welcome to stay on if you like. Thanks, Gareth. All right. Moving. Right, then moving on then to our next substantive item, which is a private plan change. Okay, Roger and Claire and Lou, I think. Liz has just left. A couple of minutes before we call this one then. So we'll just move on then to our next item on our agenda, which is a decision to notify a private plan change 20, which is obviously the Airport Northern Precinct extension. Tony, yours again.
Thank you. So I'll take the report as read and just cover off the summary. I think you might be familiar with this one too. So it's private application. There's two applicants, the airport's holding company and an adjoining neighbour. And they're seeking to extend an existing zone which isn't yet developed northwest, around about 89 hectares. Council does have a conflict because we are part owner in one of the applicants' holding companies. And so for that reason, we've got an independent consultant processing it, and we've got 2 independent commissioners lined up to hear it. I think that's it in terms of summary. It's pretty straightforward on the face of it. It'll be one because it's a regional airport that might generate a bit of public interest. I know that Waka Kotahi are looking at it in terms of roading, so there'll be some technical considerations as we go through. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Pretty exciting plan change before us. Any questions of Tony in respect of the report he's provided us? I had a question. Oh, no, way you go, Jim. I didn't see you there.
Through you, Madam Chair, it wasn't so much a question as, you know, obviously we are shareholders in the airport, but in terms of the process, I don't see any conflict that we've got as council to get this change underway, and it has been through future-proof, and that expansion has been accepted through the future-proof discussions. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Great. I have a question for you, Tony. I obviously read the reports, and it's a bit embarrassing to admit I actually really enjoyed reading them. I don't know what's gone wrong with me. I've been here too long. But I noticed there was lots of mention made of lizards and bats and taonga and archaeological sites. And I just noticed the absence of discussion around highly productive soils. And I wonder if there is a reason for that, and if there is, whether you're able to enlighten me. And just mindful of the fact that, you know, we're around this table, we're pretty keen on it, ensuring that there's just not this ongoing sprawl and gobbling up our precious soil. So I just wanted to find out if you had any observations to make on that point.
Yes, it's been a worry for, I guess, us technically as well. We have been at various forums feeding back to the Ministry for the Environment that we'd like a national policy statement out to help us guide in some of these plan changes. Because in the absence of having the highly productive land national policy statement, we don't have a lot in terms of consideration that we can actually do around that. So that's probably why you don't see it coming through the plan changes, because there's no obligation to do it. The regional policy statement does have some very high level kind of land value policies and objectives, but they can only go so far. So it's a good question. It's probably something that the applicants thought they didn't need to cover because they didn't have to. I've got no doubt that will come up through submissions and through the hearing process. At that point in time, we're more than likely to have a national policy statement on highly productive land. In fact, it was due last Friday, I understand. And so when that comes out, that will provide a much clearer direction around how we manage productive land.
Tony. Any other questions for Tony at all? No? Okay, so we have the recommendations there appearing on page 126 of our agenda to receive his report and to approve public notification of the private plan change, noting that we delegation there to Wayne Allen in terms of minor amendments. Graham's going to move that for us. Lou will second that. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent stuff. Thanks, Tony. Very large item, that one. I don't know about you lot, but I opened my agenda and just went, whoa, 1,833 pages. You've got to be kidding me. Yeah. No, excellent. So moving on then to our next agenda item, which is the Waipa District Council Community Recovery Fund. And we have obviously Gina and Corinne with us and Sally. Welcome, ladies. Nice to see you all.
Are you happy if I stay until, if there's any issue with the sports one? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, that's I'm glad you raised that. Just another, I just want to flag, I'm not saying that I believe I'm conflicted, but there was an application in here from the Te Mutu Community Food Forest, who I've communicated with prior to any of this happening, and I was very supportive of and have offered to come and help them plant trees. So I just no vested interest, not involved with them in any way, shape or form, but I may be out there on Thursday with a a spade in my hand, and I believe I might try and drag Marcus along. So just make that clear. I don't have any involvement with the organisation, but I think it's a great thing. But anyway, and you're happy to, I'm comfortable with you staying. Marcus, what are your thoughts? Are you happy to sit there? You had no involvement with Connect You? Okay, brilliant. And Lou, the same on your TA sports things. We'll say mum on all of those things. Roger. Pardon? You left, turn your microphone on. I can't hear you, Lou.
Do I need to leave the room during that discussion?
I don't think so.
I just don't take part. Okay.
Roger.
I should have registered that I'm actually a member of the Chamber of Commerce, but I don't think that that's a direct conflict.
No, I don't think it's a conflict. I think we're all pretty safe here. Otherwise, there'll be nobody left in the room. Which might not be a bad thing. No, just joking. Sally, take it away.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you for welcoming us this morning to talk about the Community Recovery Fund. So as agreed at your meeting in July, a public funding round from the Waipa District Council Community Recovery Fund has been completed. The round was open from the 18th of July to the 11th of August, and in total we received 23 applications that totaled over $350,000 in funding request. As you can tell, this well exceeded the allocated funding of $80,000 that you set for this funding round. The majority of applications were received in the last day, I could say hours, of the funding round being open. Applications were received from a cross-section of our community, from both not-for-profit organisations and businesses, which is what we extended the fund to include. Due to a variety of applications being received, or the variety and the completeness of information received, staff assessed all applications using a matrix-based approach against the fund criteria. So this is outlined in Appendix 3, and for your reference, the fund criteria which we agreed is in Appendix 2. So a number of applications requested support for child-focused initiatives, in particular counselling services, which is obviously a direct impact of the last 2.5 years of COVID. Applications also included a Haora project for disability support, the community food forest, updating online business profiles and boosting digital capacity, as well as a lot of one-off events which did not align with the criteria of supporting long-term response to COVID-19. You'll also note that we received an application in Te Reo Māori, and so in terms of this application received, we sought advice from our legal counsel, and that advice was given that on the 1st of August this year, it marked 35 years since Māori Language Act 1987 came into force, and Te Reo Māori becoming an official language of New Zealand. This meant that in any legal proceedings, a person may speak Māori, and the Māori Language Commission was created. While there's no specific legal ruling requiring council to accept correspondence or applications in Māori, however, in line with its recognition as an official language of New Zealand and our responsibilities under the Local Government Act 2002 in relation to Māori participation, it was considered appropriate that we accept the application in this case in Te Reo Māori. As we don't have translation capabilities in-house, we needed to procure these services at a cost of $150 plus GST. This approach would need to be taken on a case-by-case basis, depending on the situation going forward. However, we felt it was relevant for this example. As you can tell through the report that we've presented in front of you, and apologies for the length of the report to add to your already big agenda, through the assessment of applications, it became apparent there were 3 clear categories of applications received. One, which fitted within the criteria, applications that would further benefit discussions with both the community advisors, Jenna and Corinne, and applications which we felt did not fit the criteria, so those more one-off projects. The first group, so those that best fit the criteria and have clearly articulated a direct impact of COVID-19, is what we have put in front of you as a suggestion for funding allocation today. Now, at this point, I need to confess there is an error. In the funding table included in recommendations on page 2 of the report, or 1,197 in diligent for easy reference. After receiving feedback and checking the numbers numerous times, what I've actually suggested in the recommendation, it totals 85,000 and not 80,000. So my apologies for that. As the committee, you have an opportunity to approve the allocation as presented or not. And we have given you a revised table in front of you that includes 85,000 or 80,000. And I've underlined in italics the areas that we've changed. So please accept my humble apologies for that. I'm sure I looked at that a few times, but got gazumped in that one. So based on some questions received, and just wanted to give you a bit of background to some of the funding that we've suggested. So one of the applications received is from Zion Church, and that was for a total of 23,000 to provide counselling sessions, or 10 counselling sessions each for 23 students. In terms of the pricing per session, which is $100 per session, we felt this was consistent with other applications. However, the Zion Church has capacity to provide the services for more students, and that is the reason why we've suggested funding that greater amount for them. We are also aware that public providers have very long waiting lists with a minimum charge of $150 per hour. So we think that provides great benefit for our community there. And you'll also see that we've suggested the reduction of funding of applicants to meet what you've allocated at 80,000. 2 of those are entities that have the ability to raise the additional funding there through events that they hold within their facilities. So we feel that they could pull that funding back. So while there's a lot of information in front of you, I think I've given you the background to what we have suggested, but we're very happy to take your guidance through the chair on how you'd like to proceed with discussions. Before doing that, I really need to thank Gina and Corinne, who have worked through these applications in what was a tight time frame to get to the deadline for today's agenda. And I think this is a great opportunity to not only recognise that we still have COVID within our community, we've still got groups who are reeling the impacts of COVID, and today provides you an opportunity to help out with some funding for those groups to do the work that they have put in front of us. So just as a reminder, and Joe did send this out last week, if you want to discuss any financial information that is pertained, it would need to go into a public excluded discussion for that. So I'm joined by Gina and Corinne to answer any questions you have and take your lead on how you'd like to work through what's been suggested.
Great, thank you, Sally. Roger, before I go to you, just a quick question: how would we prefer that if there are any questions of financial nature, we'll go into public excluded, and I think it might be helpful perhaps we do that first. So if anybody has any issues around public issues that need to be raised in a public excluded environment, nod your head. Okay, so we do. Okay, so could I recommend therefore that we go into public excluded now, address those issues, and then come back for the open? Are we comfortable with it? Okay, excellent. Lou, you phone. So I'll need a mover and seconder. Have we? Andrew's happy to